Welcome everybody to our session on the digital workplace for frontline workers. It's called No One Left Behind because we don't want to leave anybody behind. My name is Patrick Püntener. I'm the CEO of LiveTiles and I'm happy to present the business in the new normal, the needs of the first line and distributed workforces with regards to communication and collaboration, must-have tools we want to look at to give you tips on how to tackle this challenge. And last but not least, how to keep everybody aligned, engaged, and happy working for you as an employer. Let me jump directly into the business in the new normal, what it looks like for leaders and the first line alike. And first of all, I think it's very important to acknowledge that first line workers matter. It doesn't really depend whether you are in retail, manufacturing, hospitality, or any other business with a lot of first-line workers, because they have all a couple of things in common, because they are very valuable in delivering direct customer feedback. They are the ones who have the contact to your customers and get very important messages from the customers that you can take back to, for example, improve processes. And of course, it's also important to have them to judge your product performance. Do we really make a good impression as a vendor, for example? Do we deliver a good service? Are our customers satisfied? It's them who get these impressions directly from the customers and firsthand. So if we look at the needs and also the current situation of many of these deskless workers or frontline workers, we have some numbers here that show that not everything is perfect for them right now. For example, a lot of them don't feel really valued by their employer. And I mean, 34% is quite a lot. If you look at this aspect of not feeling valued, that's really a lot. And also, if you see what kind of information source they are looking at and how they judge the value of these information sources, it turns out that most of them, they rely on their direct managers. And in lack of having other systems and other tools and sources to get information from the company, that's their only choice. But only about 1/3 thinks that the manager is a reliable source. So more than or almost 2/3 think it's not an accurate source. And that's maybe because of politics, because of personal feelings, but nevertheless, I think it's important to acknowledge that if this is the only source, we have a problem for these workers. We need to give them something else. Now, the typical communication challenges in these areas we have, if we want to find a solution for this problem, is that not only do we have very often a global workforce that is dispersed over many locations, and of course, first-line workers are almost always remote working for people. So they don't have a laptop, they don't have a desktop, they have a small screen, and they also have limited screen time because their main activity is actually being with the customer or doing something else and not working on the computer. So if you look at their environment they're working in, very often it's a hostile environment. They're working in a production hall, they're working on a construction site, and sometimes they don't even have their own devices. They share a device with someone else, and in many cases they also have poor connectivity. So providing them a tool and a technology to give them a better access to information is not very easy, both from a technical but also from a language and cultural aspect, because very often you have seasonal or temporary contracts with people who don't speak the same language that is your official company language, for example. So translation is needed, ideally automatic translation, because you can't translate everything manually. And also very often the leadership communication is perceived as being something that is very far away, with leaders in the ivory tower, just not reaching the base of the company, and all that together makes it not quite easy to provide people at the base with information they need. But what are these needs? What are these needs of the first line and distributed workforces? And also, how can you as an employer and as a leader make sure they are not drowning in information overload, but really get relevant information from you. If we look a little bit back, and I think we don't have to look back a lot, we discover that there's something called a newsletter that many companies use to inform people wherever they are in the organization. The newsletter has some advantages. It's standardized. It appears periodically. You can hand it out to everyone. You don't need any technical device for this. And it has quite a high adoption because it's something that you get in your hands. It's a trusted source because it's printed. And yeah, it's quite a serious thing to have, and works quite well. But there are also some serious disadvantages because very often you can't communicate current things in a newsletter because it appears only monthly, for example. So the timeliness is not very good. It's also not personalized. Everybody gets the same newsletter, so a lot of information might not be relevant for each individual. The production cost is high, it's slow to distribute, and it's not interactive at all. So you won't get any feedback other than maybe someone saying that this was good or bad regarding a content in the newsletter. There is no interaction, no possibility to really poll, no possibility to create statistics or analysis on the content and how it's perceived and used by the people. So I think it's a little bit an old-fashioned way of communicating, and we should find ways to actually go around or mitigate these disadvantages that old-fashioned ways of communications have. Because if you don't do it, there's a lot of things that your first line might be missing out. Starting from being really aligned with culture and company goals, strategic goals, moving to being informed about current things and not only from time to time. Also, the aspect of building a trust in the workplace is very important and getting more and more important as people get more and more disconnected, especially now where everybody's working from home. So almost any worker is a remote worker right now. And trust is very important. Also, engagement becomes more and more important. You need to do things to really engage people, to love what they do. And you should also encourage two-way conversations because many first lines don't have other means of communicating. They don't have email and they don't have other tools, and you don't want to use them WhatsApp, for example. So this should also be considered. Also, digital collaboration in digital processes should be considered because it is helping you to become more efficient in these collaborative processes as well. And very often you need also to communicate change, and that needs to be quickly and efficiently or effectively. And then maybe there are situations where quick communication becomes even more important, which is in a dangerous situation where you have to alert staff about something that is just happening, where they need to be cautious. And last but not least, you should also, of course, give them access to documentation and training they need every day to do their work. And all these things you can't do with an email or with a newsletter, but you can do it with a modern employee app. Now, the other side is how to do this in a way that really works. Because if you just load all the information in such an app and provide it to your first line, it would probably not help because it will be too much. And it will also be maybe too boring, or there won't be new information often enough to go back to the app and look what is new and important. So there are a couple of formats that you could use more than just publishing a news or posting a page or a comment about something that makes the thing more interesting. And that's important because user adoption only comes if there is an active content that is relevant for the people, where they can interact with each other, with the leadership team, and also give feedback to the company. And we have some examples here, like, for example, podcasts where you record messages to make them more personal, for example, directly from the leadership team, It can give them much better profile if they appear directly in a personal message, for example. This could be also a video message, and then you could, for example, create public meetings where leadership people are talking about things and other people can attend directly, for example, by supporting it with a moderated chat where people can ask questions. So really formats that are like an event, not just a content. And of course, you can use the modern tools to personalize content based on, for example, location, based on department, based on the role someone has, so that the content that is actually displayed for each individual user is relevant to him or her. Other things is that are important is, for example, that you can capture feedback with such a modern tool, and really then also use this feedback to improve your content, to find out what is really useful for your people and what isn't. And last but not least, there are also modern technologies to capture sentiment. That can also be a way to know if your content is well received or if you need to improve something. We have some examples here. For example, in LiveTiles, within LiveTiles, we did a challenge during the last lockdown, people posting their socks. And that was quite funny and helping people who are working from at home to maybe keep the contact to their colleagues in a playful way. So challenges is a very good way of offering people the opportunity to exchange information, even if it's not directly business related. Or a moderated chat, as I mentioned before, can be, for example, used to support interactive town hall meetings where you connect several locations to a live stream, and then people can join from wherever they are and ask questions through the moderated chat. A moderator is picking the most interesting ones, and maybe someone from the leadership team is answering them. What is also important and has become important in recent times is that you are able to communicate during emergencies. So a good example is the COVID situation for many companies where they had to inform people, for example, you can't come to the office for the next 3 weeks, or tomorrow we will have changes, you need this and this and this, and your work processes need to change because of this or that. So in this situation, it's very important that you can cope with 3 things. So first of all, you really need a dedicated channel for this relevant communication. So it wouldn't work to send out emails, because emails would not be seen because they drown in the mailboxes of people. The second one is you need to reach everybody everywhere. So if you look at first lines, you have to remember that they most often have a private smartphone and nothing else. So you need to make sure that your content is actually reaching them on their private smartphone. Which leads to the third aspect. It should not have an IT footprint, the solution that you're using, because it might very well be that your IT is not prepared for that, and that people actually don't have access from external places to your network. So this needs to run outside your IT, basically. As a SaaS service, for example, is a good way if you run that in the cloud and don't install some solutions in-house. So altogether, if you look at needs and possibilities, we see a very big potential in this space, and you should also be creative, because if you implement such a solution, the more you can put in it and the more aspects you can combine, the more valuable the solution gets for your people. And these kind of solutions are most suitable when you have, for example, to support repetitive tasks or things that are boring to make them more fun, or information that is urgent. If you have to transmit this, it's a very good way to have such a tool. And of course, it's always the case if you are away from your desk, not only for your first lines, but also for your people who have a desk workplace. If they're moving, if they're traveling, they can still access the information. They can still hear and see the communication. It's also very useful to have such an app approach, because it's very simple to access information. So even if you have just a little bit of downtime during tasks, you can quickly look at the new information that is there for you. And then there's, of course, also more advanced scenarios. So like, for example, if you're working in the manufacturing area and have to work with sensors. You could combine this with an app to capture information even from your machines and combine it with the other information that you have. And very often it's the only option, because the only screen a first-line worker has is very often the smartphone screen of his or her private phone. This leads us to the tools that could be employed for this. And actually, it's quite simple, because all you need to do all this is an app. It's a so-called employee app. And this will help you to embrace mobile and social communication and actually reach everybody everywhere. And it is also a way of achieving the other things that I mentioned before, to really reduce the noise, to make sure relevant information reaches people in the right situations, in the right context, and also to be able to communicate in emergencies. So why an app, and why not one of all these other tools that you already have, like, for example, your intranet or your mailing tool or anything else that might be around? We think the problem with most other tools is that they are too cumbersome, too complex, too slow, or not enough modern to personalize information, for example. And you have to think that these people, your first line, are not in general, they're not very IT savvy, because they're not using a lot of applications in their daily work. They're working with machines, they're working maybe directly with clients, talking to clients, doing stuff in a more manual way. And they're not used to a complex intranet, for example, so they would struggle with some of the solutions you already have in place. And by employing an app, you can go around this problem. You can also communicate much more often, because communication through an app is much easier. Thus, you can build strong relationship with your first line, and you can really make sure to reach everybody, regardless of device, regardless of how he or she is connected. You can even reach, for example, people who don't have a fixed contract or are working for a partner of yours in a common project, for example. And this is important because you need to build a collaborative culture of trust, and you should also encourage people to actively participate in this. So bottom-up conversations, or also employee-driven content, people who see something in the company, just make a picture of it, post it in the company or in a group of people, and make them aware of something new, something important, something dangerous, or whatever they just saw. If you choose a tool, you should also be aware that there are various ways of communication. So we distinguish in principle between two ways. One is directional and one is conversational. And a tool like an employee app most often supports mainly the directional flow. So if you as a company want to inform a lot of people, you can do this with directed information that you publish to everybody, or to a location of your business, or to a group of people, and giving them the opportunity to give you feedback. But not everybody is an author, not everybody can publish, but you have a few authors that are official communicators, and you have a lot of listeners that can give feedback but can't publish. That's the case for news, for managing and promoting events, for providing access to important information like policies, instructions, and so on. But this use case does not support the conversation between people. This is the conversational information flow that you see to the right. And ideally, an app supports both, because then you can really also give people a tool that they can use for ad hoc chats, or just ask a question to a colleague and get an answer, or also groups and communities to exchange information and knowledge. So this is important. You should support both kind of conversations or information flows. And then there are a couple of other things a solution should provide. First and foremost, of course, it should not be an island or a silo in your landscape, but it should be well integrated with your other systems, especially if other parts of the business are using SharePoint or Teams, which is often the case. You should make sure that there is a good integration, because you don't want to communicate twice, once to your first line and second time with the same content in another tool to your, let's say, office workers. One very important aspect is multilinguality. So ideally, a tool should provide automatic translation in as many languages as possible. And you should also make sure that all the languages, let's say from Eastern Asia, where maybe your production sites are supported to really make information understandable for everyone. Of course, it should be of course, an analytics function should be there to really create a value out of your conversation and make sure you can improve it. And personalized content is important, so content targeting capabilities is a must. And then you should, of course, also look at low operations cost, which can be achieved if you have a cloud service and don't have to build an expensive infrastructure yourself. And last but not least, I think it's very important to have a good support for various ways of authenticating users and single sign-on with other tools that you might use, because there is one really major aspect that you shouldn't forget. If you can't onboard your people, you can't reach them. Onboard means they need to have the possibility to register and use the app, even if they don't have a corporate account. So there are various ways of doing it. And for example, you could invite someone with a private email address. You could enable a self-service registration and then make sure people who register themselves are really employees of your company. This can be supported, for example, by a unique ID that they are provided by you, or by supporting authentication through mobile phone numbers instead of emails. There are various ways of doing it. You should just make sure that the app you're using are supporting them. And then it's not all about news. So these apps very often offer a comprehensive set of tools. And I have some examples how other customers are using this. So for example, Engie, which is leading provider of facility management services, they have digitized all their instruction manuals, technical manuals, and everything their frontline workers need to maintain machines and technical equipment in the sites they are managing. And this is very practical because, first of all, people don't need to run around with paper booklets anymore. And second, if there's an update, they get it immediately. They even get a push notification if a technical equipment is working differently now, or they have to maintain it in a different way, and can just check it. And the next time they have to do the maintenance, they already know it. The second example is Burkhardt Compression, who is actually not only communicating with their own employees, but also with their clients. So they're offering an access to all their clients in a specific area where they promote events and provide information about their product directly to the clients. And that enables them to communicate to everybody, all stakeholders, through one app with different target groups. Very simple and very efficient. Or the University Hospital in Zurich, they're using a posts feature to create communities of practice and fostering a conversation between people who have questions and experts who are answering them. That's also a very good way of engaging employees. Or the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners have connected more than 80 partners in Switzerland here to communicate with each other as a group of people who have the same interest. For example, sharing a common directory with all employees of all Microsoft partners through one app. So there are many other aspects than just news and updates that such an app can help you with. Last but not least, we have one example of a company who is very small, also showing that this is not only for big enterprises, because it's actually very easy to implement. Helitransair is a German provider of helicopter services, and they only have 50 staff, but they're all flying around, and they use our employee app in that case as their single and most important communications tool for everything they do. All information, all communication goes through this app. This gets us to the next and last chapter. How do you really keep everybody aligned, engaged, and happy? So what possibilities do you have, and what examples are there to really be successful with such an approach? We think there are three main areas you have to master. First of all, you have to create a shared understanding. So you really need to deliver information to your first line that makes them understand what your company does. Otherwise, they will not get why it is important what they're doing, and they will not get what is the difference of being employed with your company or with your competitor. The second one is you need to create a solid platform of trust, meaning that the leadership team in your company should be visible, should be transparent, and should have the possibility to more or less directly communicate also with the first line. At least the first line should see that the leadership team is there and that they're doing something for them. So that is fostering high employee engagement. It's creating a personal connection, and it's actually solving you the problem that good talent leaves you because they're not connected to the company and go over the street to your competitor just because they earn 50 cents more per hour. So the third one is, of course, you need to find ways to increase performance of your employees, of your teams, because after all, that's what you're looking for. You want to work more efficiently, and this automatically happens if people are more engaged, actually. It's not a matter of optimizing processes, and such an app doesn't help you to measure what people are doing, if they're doing it faster, but it's really about engagement, about getting into a flow that comes automatically if people are more happy and more engaged. And there are a lot of examples of how you can do this. I will just pick some of them. One very good one is British Airways. When they had their first look at the Airbus A380, there were some cabin crew members who noted that something in the galley layout was not optimal. And since they had an app, they were able to just make small pictures, small sketches, and describe very briefly what they meant. And since also the guys from engineering who sat in a completely different location had access to this app, they saw this and they could immediately see that this is of value and would improve something that they can change now, but not later. So in a matter of days, it was changed and improved. And it's just a small example, but I think the success of such an approach comes with these small examples. Another one is Selfridges. They found out that actually a lot of their people who are working in the stores, they have so many customer connections that they probably have a very good feeling of what really is a good customer service. So they introduced a hashtag called #CustomerStories, where employees from the shops could post good experiences they had with customers. Then management would go through them every month and pick the customer story of the month. Also a very good way to foster transparency and esteem, and to really make people proud at the front line that they are actually delivering something good to the company. And this story goes even so far that after a while, there was a guy they called Nick the Doorman. It was a doorman who posted many good stories, and he became an internal celebrity. Last but not least, never forget the emotions. I think it is mostly about emotions. All of this engagement is about emotions. So we have introduced a new tool called LiveTiles Vibe to capture these emotions, and it's a part of the employee app experience, so that you can capture feelings. How do your people? How does your frontline feel? How well are they? You can capture their engagement. How engaged are they? And you can also capture alignment. So the three most important things that will tell you if what you're doing, what you're communicating, is good or could be improved. And I think that's a very important aspect that is often forgotten. Very often people think we just have to communicate and then all is good, everybody will know, but that's probably not always the case. And only if you measure what you do, only if you can capture the feedback and the emotions of your people, you really know if it's good or not. So this was my last slide. I thank you for your attendance, and now we are open for questions.